Wow.
Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome to my latest episode of Mrs Mummypenny Talks. And it is, of course, time to have another guest. I always get my hands going the wrong way. And I'm very, very excited to welcome Jennifer Broadley to the podcast this week. Now, I'll do a little bit of an intro to Jennifer before she tells us a bit more. But basically, I know Jennifer because she was my therapist.
Hey.
She saved, oh God, I was going to say you saved my life. I really feel a huge debt of gratitude to you for the help you gave me. And I'll try not to get upset in June because I was in a really bad way. I was physically falling apart and I felt like I was mentally falling apart, and you sort of swooped into my life like an angel, because we met on a course where we were both delegates on the course.
Yeah.
And then you ended up helping me out with some therapy. So I really wanted to get you on just to talk about the power of psychotherapy and what a difference it can make, and you do things in a bit of a different way. So tell us about you, Jennifer. I gave you a really good introduction there, but tell us about what you do for your business, and then maybe give us a bit of a potted history of how you ended up getting to where you are.
Yeah, so so nice to be here, Lynn. Thank you so much for inviting me on, and just well done you for everything you're doing and everything you've done. It's just you've done brilliantly. And are doing brilliantly. So I have two businesses. I run, my first business is a psychotherapy business. It's called Healthy Chat. And I've run that probably for about 9 years now. I'm a human givens psychotherapist. So the therapy that we do is fast and effective. Pretty much there are a couple of things that make it super speedy. One is we deal with trauma immediately, often just within the first session. And that's a bigger conversation about how that happens, but it is, kind of it's a thing that makes human givens stand out. And the second thing is that we integrate kind of mental and emotional rehearsal into our therapy as well. So there's a kind of like a relaxation stage, I guess, at the end that helps people to really imagine the life that they want to have, in which case they're much more likely to be able to experience it faster. So Healthy Chat has been going for about 8 years. I work with men, women, children from all over the country. Mm-hmm. I work with people from overseas as well. But actually now I'm much more national now that since COVID happened. I've shut down all of my practices. So I used to have practices in Aberdeen, Edinburgh, Dundee, and then the city that's nearest me. But I shut them all down. They shut the last of them down in about March, and just decided that I would shift the whole business online, which is what I've done. And so now I work with people over Zoom and FaceTime, and it is as effective, as long as, like you and I having this conversation just now, we just have the conversation, do the work, and make the commitments and make the changes. And that's really what it is about mental health. Is if you do nothing, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So often it's about changing either a mindset thing or some practical things, and then building up the confidence to do those, and figuring out all the reasons why you haven't done them, but then figuring out how to break down those barriers and then do them. So that's my one business over there. That's Healthy Chat. On the other side, I've run a business for nearly 20 years called, it used to be branded something else, but it's now just branded JenniferBroadley.com. And it is an exec coaching business. So originally I was a high performance coach, which I still am. So I work in large corporates and for business owners. And this is not a mental health issue. Everyone should have a coach. Every high performing person should have someone who is independent to their work and their life, who holds the vision and the expectations for that person and holds them accountable for taking conscious action towards those things every week, month, year. And so my kind of expectation with jenniferbroadley.com, is to have is to set up conversations that change lives, really. Same with Healthy Chat, but you know, one's a mental health things and one's a high performance thing, so I brand them completely differently. And jenniferbroadley.com, I deal with CEOs, MDs, senior leaders, people who have, you know, expectations for themselves, and their high performance positively impacts themselves and their family, but also positively impacts the people inside their teams, and then themselves and their families as well. So if you start at the top, you're much more likely to have a high performing individual, team, company. If you work it in that way. And I've done that for probably 20 years. Yeah. And I love both jobs. They're
So you've been self-employed for 20 years then?
Yeah, pretty much. I was self-employed, yeah, for actually it's been 18 years, because I made the shift when I had my daughter, who's 18 now.
Right, yeah.
I single parented her from the very beginning, like from I was 3 months pregnant when I left my marriage. And so and very soon after that, so I literally had 14 weeks of maternity leave, went back to work. I was commercial director for a large magazine publishing company, and then so I went back after 14 weeks, and then we'd done a round of redundancies while I was on maternity leave. I was commercial director for the new business section of that company, and when I went back the second time, I was like, oh, do you know what? We probably need to make another round of redundancies. But I could see that it made sense for me to be in that.
Yeah.
And so I did that. And actually, it was one of those weird things.
You orchestrated your own removal from the business.
Correct. I know. And it's a really weird thing then, because I had always wanted to work for myself. My dad was an entrepreneur. My dad worked for himself since he was probably 28. And my mum, she always did her own things. So she set up catering companies and things. So I kind of thought that one day I would work for myself. I just didn't know when and how. And so when it happened, I literally was, I think I went back to work after 14 weeks. I had this tiny little baby. I had a nanny share who would just look after my little baby. Plus I had a really good friend whose child was about 12 weeks older. And she'd only taken 6 months as well. She was a kind of a high performing person in publishing. She went back early too. And we had this nanny share, and we both just went straight back to work. I went straight back to work. And then within 3 months, I was made redundant with a nice redundancy package. So it was a proper privilege.
Yeah.
And with that, I retrained. So I additionally trained for my first degree. I then did a postgrad in exec coaching and set up the exec coaching company. That was 18 years ago.
Yeah.
And actually, when I look back now, that allowed me to raise my daughter in a way, you know, in a way that I couldn't have if I'd had a salary job. And I've literally not gone back to corporate. I've not gone back to corporate salary job in 18 years. And I can't, well, I mean, never say never, but I can't, it just works for me working for myself. I've kind of set it all up. I love my home office. I love that the commute is literally a set of stairs. I love it. I love it.
The flexibility of running your own business, you can't put a price on it, can you? Because that's when I talk about the sort of advantages of running your own business versus the disadvantages, I always put that as the number one, because so I've been self-employed for 5 years, so my youngest was 2. So at that point I had a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. And then suddenly, like, I was able to do the school run every day, and any sort of, you know, extra sporting commitments and stuff. It was all possible to go to the mall and take them there. And you just have this incredible amount of flexibility. And like we're pre-recording this interview at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I know we look pretty good for 7 o'clock in the morning.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Pretty, sort of good. Yeah, you can fit everything in around your own diary, can't you? I mean, I suppose you've got a bit more structure because you have a lot of client sessions, but then I have a lot of meetings with people, and you just work it around your own diary.
Yeah, and I think also if you can plan ahead when you're working on your own. So I would do things like school runs. I would drop my daughter by 8:30 in the morning. I was back at my desk by 9. Start to see clients from 9:30 through till 4:30. I pick up my daughter at 5, and then I do all the sports things.
Yeah.
You know, all the football runs, all the music lessons. You know, you do all that, but you'll never get those 2 decades back.
No.
And those 2 decades, she's just about to go to university, but those 2 decades have been, I cannot put into words, it makes me a bit emotional. What a privilege that's been.
That's amazing.
To be able to work.
Yeah.
And actually, I also think a privilege to be able to be a woman and have that choice. If we just shift into the equality space here for a second.
Yeah.
What a privilege that's been for me to be able to make the choice to raise a daughter on my own. And when I say on my own, I mean, it takes a village to raise a child, right? So I have had, loads of support from family who have stepped in, and friends who, you know, we've nanny shared and we've lift shared, and you have to be super, super organized.
Oh yeah.
But my goodness, I look at what I've been able to contribute to her life so far, and I'm just grateful. I'm just super, super grateful. But is it hard work? Yeah. I mean, sometimes you've got to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go, right, well, I've got to get this stuff done before 7, and I've got to get, I mean, you know this, you're an early person, right?
Yeah. I often, I run out of steam in the evenings, and I tend to have, sort of 3 or 4 big deadlines each week. So let's say I had a deadline that I had to hit by Sunday for a piece, Sunday just gone. Yeah. But I got up really early on Monday morning and I wrote the piece between sort of 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. If I know what I'm writing about and it's something I'm very passionate about, I can literally just write it quickly and sent it to the client, and they had it by 9 o'clock. So they didn't know any different that I'd missed a deadline. They had it by, you know, start of business. So it's I really like the I love the getting up early and sort of dealing with the day, you know, writing my to-do list, getting a chunk of those things done, and then what I'm trying to do at the moment, because I think we talked during my therapy, we talked about my new rules that I've tried to come up with. Can't say I've been that successful with my new rules, but I am really trying. I'm trying to get most of my workload done by like 9-10 in the morning when the boys are here, so I can then dedicate my day to them, because obviously I have my boys here half of the time rather than the whole of the time, because we are both fellow divorced mums.
Oh yeah, and you co-parent with your boy's dad. Yeah.
Co-parent, we could use that word.
Parallel parent, probably. Yeah. And I think when you actually acknowledge it, it's this thing, isn't it? It's this thing about parenting being a full-time unpaid job, like salary, like money unpaid job. But there is no more important job in the world than raising our precious next generation. There just isn't. And so when we have women and men who equally recognize that as the most important job possible, because if you raise children who are smart and aware and fit and can and sociable and are, you know, able to problem solve and able to appreciate the arts, they can do music and they can do sport. If you raise children like that, that's a proper job for 20 years.
Yeah.
So you're doing that job and you're doing a salary. These are two separate. Now you're doing a salary making job as well. So you can't do that in an 8-hour day, because part of the fact that raising children can start at 6 o'clock and can go until 10 o'clock at night. Where do you work?
Yeah.
So how do you fit in a salary job? And you can only do that if you either hire help.
Yeah.
Or you make your time stretch, or you literally do little tricks like, okay, after supper, it's your TV hour, and literally you sit in front of the TV or you give them a job and you get to your desk and you answer 15 emails in an hour, and then you go back and go, okay, right, bath time. You know, and literally I know mostly women, I mean some men do that, but mostly women who are literally juggling their lives, I mean, so incredibly impressively,
year
after year, and handling all the other stuff that goes with, if it's an amicable divorce or separation, that's fine, but quite often there's a bit of friction that goes with that, and then they're handling that whole friction thing on the side, which is often based around unawareness and disrespect.
Mm-hmm.
But this person is not aware that you are raising their children full-time job at the same time as doing another full-time job, and just not necessarily appreciating the value of that and what it takes.
And I think we need to touch on the fact where you said it is mostly women who are in that situation. It is mostly women because we are the prime caregivers. I'm not going to be generalistic and say it's all women, because I know it isn't, but certainly I know from my personal experience, I was running a full-time business. I was running everything to do with the children. I was cooking all the food. I was sorting out the house. I was doing all the logistics, taking them, sorting out the kids' birthday parties, plus all the shitty parties they have to go to every 2 weeks. And I was at like explosion point, and talking to a lot of my girlfriends who are married and in this situation, it's like, I mean, hopefully they're in happier marriages, but it's fucking shit, right?
Yeah.
It's really tough for women.
Yeah. And I think in a way now, but I think it'll level out. I don't know if it'll level out in our lifetime, I have no idea. But I don't know where this unawareness has come from. You see, because I think women so far have had to build up this awareness about what it takes to, to commit to working. And the reason that so many are now committing to saying, I cannot not work, is because they know that attached to that is a level of choice and freedom that they wouldn't otherwise have. Otherwise, their choice and freedom comes through the person that they're partnering with, who is generating the money. And that is too complex a situation to navigate for lots of women, because they're like, I don't want to have to ask for those things. I shouldn't have to say, can we have, can I go and have 200 quid for holiday clothes for the children? You don't have to ask for that. It's like, where's the account? Can I do that? And but I think it takes for both people to be family aware. It takes for both people to be financially aware. And it takes for both people to be respectful of each other as they're raising children, because it's a long old journey.
Yeah.
And also then we prioritize our children instead of prioritizing the other partner. And that's often where, where the thing comes unstuck, is that, you've got a partner who feels neglected, and that just leads from one thing to another.
Yeah. And 42% of marriages end in divorce, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And actually, so many more relationships now, people are just choosing not to get married. So they partner up. And I think these are the wisest decisions, to be fair. You see it happening much more in, I think, Scandinavia. I think Finland and Japan are the two biggest countries where the marriage rate has massively dropped. But it's not like relationships have dropped. Couples are choosing, because I think the thing about, I can't believe we've got into marriage, but anyway, so I think the thing about marriage is that I think it's a bit of a funny old thing, because it's packaged as a romantic gesture, but it is actually a legal
and it's very expensive to get out of.
Oh my gosh, like minimum, I would say minimum, if you're lucky, 5 grand. But in lots of cases, 10, 15, 20, 25, and then years of your life, and how much less, because it's complicated, and there are people on the outside who benefit from the complications, and financially benefit from the complications. It's not okay. And actually people at the end of it are, these women who end up going, oh my gosh, I am broke, I am raising children, I am trying to have a job, I'm not on a 80 grand salary, I'm on a 24 grand salary. And how do I make this thing juggle? Well, they're dealing with all the emotions, where they watch their partner who's on an 80 or 120 or 200 grand salary going, by the way, make sure the kids have new school shoes. You're like, what? But yeah, I think that is going to, I think it is changing, but I think it's changing probably too slowly and with a lot of knock-on mental health implications. And so I set up a group about only about 2 years ago called Working Mums Divorce Recovery. It's a Facebook group, and it's a really good, positive, uplifting, practical, helpful tips and strategies for anyone. Well, it's in the title. If you're working, if you're a mum, and if you're going through the divorce process, or you're out the other side and trying to figure the emotional stuff out.
Yeah.
Fantastic group to be in.
Yeah. I'm in it. It is a very it's a very positive group, and the posts I love the most are like, somebody posted a really lovely post the other day where she was just wearing like a beautiful rainbow dress, and she was like, I've got the freedom to go out and buy what I want, and I was just like, oh my god, my heart has out for what you must have been through in your marriage and probably financial abuse, but go you. I
know. And then she gets to buy this dress, and I remember that lady. She was delightful, and she just said, "Oh, this is the first time I've bought something where I haven't had to ask permission to buy it. It was more expensive than I would normally have bought it, but look at my dress." And I think her new boyfriend as well, hadn't he? He was lovely, and he said, "Let's go out and just sit somewhere in your rainbow dress." And I'm like, "Oh, that's a lovely post."
So lovely, and it gives me. But what I think, what we have to be, what I certainly have to be careful about is not being bitter about what I've been through, because I've been through a really challenging time. But I don't want to turn into like a man hater, because that's not what life's about, right? Because I want to move on and meet somebody much better, but not yet. But I think that having that positive mindset around you from that group and from like a lot of my friends and stuff is really, really helping, because yes, you have to, I think from a mental health perspective, we all have trauma in our lives of one thing or another, and one person's trauma is no different to another person's trauma in the impact of how it's affected them. So the death of a dog can affect you as much as the death of a parent. I know that sounds very trivial, but it can, depending on your perspective to life, right? Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, I've always been very I've always had a lot of therapy and counselling throughout my life, because my parents died when I was younger and I bloody needed it. So I've always been very open to the help it can give you, and I would love for anybody listening to this to just sort of think that the psychotherapy, it sounds quite scary, that oh my gosh, I must be like going crazy if I need some kind of psychotherapy. It's not like that at all. It's just it's a slightly more effective form of therapy than counselling, because counselling, I mean, you can probably decipher it better than me, but from my experience, counselling is talking, opening up a load of boxes of shit and not dealing with that. Yeah. So counselling for me had just gone on for years and years and years and years, and it's only when I've actually had some proper psychotherapy that I've actually been able to address some of the traumas and come up with sort of really decent coping mechanisms. But we won't go into I think if somebody has a trauma and they want to deal with it, then they should probably reach out to you and have like an initial sort of chat consultation with you. But you have managed to almost erase trauma from my memory, which is really bizarre.
Yeah. So, and it's a funny old thing, trauma, because historically we've made trauma be this really complicated thing, and really difficult to unpick, and not because so, and again, lots of people make a decent living out of dealing with other people's trauma. And I don't mean that to be a critical thing, because I do believe that in the health and mental health sector, whether you run your own private business or whether you're NHS, everyone is doing the best they can with the skills that they have, for sure. However, some treatments are more effective than others. And one of the things from human givens therapy, and that's the only therapy that I will work with in Healthy Chat. One thing is that we deal with trauma, we spot it quickly, and when we deal with it quickly, because there's no point in doing any other type of therapy until you have dealt with a trauma. Because and you're absolutely right, trauma can be anything. So I've had the classic one you think of is PTSD through being in active battle in a war zone. And so I deal with soldiers, ex-soldiers, military. I deal with them regularly, and they've often been through a long and difficult and really quite heartbreaking journey to resolve their PTSD, and they get allocated. There's an amazing charity called PTSD Resolution, and this is an ex-serviceman. I think he's a general or a colonel, something like that. He was really high up before he left the army, and he set up this thing. He researched all therapies. And because he said, if I'm going to set up a charity, I want the therapy that is the most effective for the serviceman that I am going to fund to come and see a therapist. And he ended up with human givens therapy, and he only employs human givens therapists throughout the country to work with his ex-servicemen and women. And he only does that because the charity PTSD Resolution funds, I think it's 4, maybe it's 5 or 6 sessions for each of their ex-servicemen and women who are suffering from PTSD, and pretty much they're all done before 6 sessions. Like, they're like, do you know what, I'm fine, I can go back to that job, my relationship's changed, I've no longer have rage issues, that's changed my marriage, that's changed, and that's kind of amazing that you can deal with trauma that fast. But if you don't deal with trauma, you go into other types of therapy, not all, but most other types of therapy, and you talk about that stuff. And you all back up in your imagination, and your imagination can't tell the difference between what's real and what's not real. So when your imagination goes through the details of that, you feel it, your stress levels rise, you feel the anxiety in your tummy, your shoulders go up and tighten. And we should not re-traumatize our clients. We shouldn't do it. We should have a method, a really effective method that deals with trauma in the first session, to allow you for it not to be the thing that you're matching against, or not to be the thing that your brain is protecting itself against. And then you move on to saying, okay, so what are the now that we've dealt with the trauma, which we do in the first session, then what to do? Then how does this now going to affect your relationships, or your work, or your aspirations for the future, or your relationship with your children, or the fact that you've been wanting to do run a marathon or do an Ironman for 10 years and you've never been able to do it because if you're too far away from home, you get anxiety. You know what I mean? But trauma is a huge thing that we deal with regularly, and it doesn't have to be just active service. It can be exactly like you said. It can be children who. I had an amazing client recently who had this incredible anxiety issue. I'm like, she's smart, she's aware, she's creative, she's confident. What is this thing? Turns out she was raised in a family with a severely autistic child. And so as one of the sibling group, she and the other siblings were kind of put to the side somewhat, because the parents had to respond and react to a meltdown or rage in their severely autistic son. And she lived around that for 10, 15 years before she left home. And it was only once she'd left home and gone to university that she realized, oh my gosh, other families are not like this. Like, you don't have to keep all your precious things in drawers in case they get smashed up. And you don't have to always the world won't break if you don't put if you chuck your coat on a chair instead of putting it on a coat hanger, but if the coat wasn't in the right place, when you come in and the sibling with autism comes in, then it's not in the right place, and then the whole thing kicks off. So everyone had to do things routine, systemized, and you realize that's that person's informative years. And I mean, what do you know? What, unless you speak to someone who can kind of show you the pattern matches that you're making, and say, look, can you recognize that that was the right pattern match for for that decade, but it's not the right pattern match for you to live the life of freedom that you want to live now.
That's incredibly powerful.
See,
I think we should touch on the course that we did together that we met on, because I think that loops into what you're talking about with early sort of starts. The things you go through as a child and a young person has such an impression on you as an adult, and then it takes you a few years to suss it all out, and then eventually hopefully you get to a point where you maybe have some therapy. But so our mutual friend Freya has come up with a course called Emotionally Wealthy People, which it's still in sort of beta testing mode, so that means that she's still testing it on people. And she ran the course it was middle May, wasn't it? End of May. And we did it for about 2 weeks, and we went through a couple of really intense sessions, and then we did like homework every day for like a week afterwards. But my big takeout from it for me, so yeah, it's to do with money, but actually, because emotionally wealthy people, it's actually to do with your life as a whole and how you react to relationships with friends, family, work, money. But the big takeout for me was learning about sort of the 9 core needs we as individuals need, and you'll probably be able to list them better than me, but you hone in on those 9 needs and you work out which ones are your core needs, right? So I know through the journaling process and the course that my 3 core needs are control, very, very much so. Control is a big issue for me. Not issue, it's just a big need for me. Security, closely linked to control, and then status is quite important to me as well. And I've not really gotten to the bottom of why status is so important, to be honest, but I know why control and security are really important to me, because all control was ripped apart away from me when I was 16 when my mum died, and hence also security is really important to me because I lost my home. So it's very important to me to have a roof over my head that I own. But so there was these 9 core needs we went through, and you can probably share what the other 6 are as well. But once you know that about you, and like if you, Jennifer, were to say what your sort of core needs are, then we can almost interact better as 2 people, because you understand what my core needs are and I understand what yours are if we're in a business relationship or a partner relationship or whatever. So it was pretty revolutionary, like learning that about myself. And it also applies to money as well, right? And totally. It's just an incredible course, isn't it?
It was a great course, a fantastic course. And I think you're right. So emotionally wealthy people, it kind of reframes money, doesn't it? To say, is money as big in your life as you really think it is? Like if you really understood what your emotions are and what they're there for, would money hold as much, would it be as much a kind of temple or god as lots of us make it out to be? It's like, well, a job that earns £200,000 must be twice as successful as if I earn 100,000. And you go, well, but if you hate the job at 200,000, why would you do it? Like, why would you do it every day? Or if it means you have to travel and you miss seeing your children, or why would you do those things? So I think it kind of puts money into context. Mm-hmm. And yet the emotional needs, and those that I get that those are your 3, and so of those 9, so we have, to put that in context, I guess, if you imagine that we've all got physical needs, and I know you know this, but so if those physical needs get met healthily, it's almost impossible to be physically unhealthy. So if we eat healthily, remain hydrated, sleep well, and exercise often, then you're going to give yourself the best chance to be physically high performing as you can.
Yeah.
But actually, if you even if miss one of those out, if you don't eat healthily, so if you eat, crisp sandwiches every day, you're mentally, it's going to not just affect you physically, but it's going to affect you mentally as well. Or if you don't give yourself proper sleep, so if you stay up till 2 a.m. playing Xbox and then get back up at 6 because you actually have an addiction there, you're not going to be able to, you're going to feel that something's off.
Yeah.
And your emotional needs are the same as that. So if you can, and each of those needs, by the way, the physical needs, you can get them met healthily or unhealthily. So you can, and you don't need to know what they are, your physical needs, because your body, because they're needs, your body is programmed to get them met. So you don't need to say, oh, I wonder if it's time to sleep, because your body will feel tired. I don't need to say, is it time to drink something, because your body will prompt you with thirst, because these 4 things. And you don't need to say, oh, is it time to exercise? Because you'll feel agitation. You know what, I need to go for a walk. So because they're essential things, then we're already got body programming to make sure that they get met. And the emotional needs are exactly the same. Instead of being 4, there are 9. And they are security. Do I feel secure? Do I feel like I'm in control? Status. So do I feel like I'm well represented amongst my peers and the people that are around me? Privacy, do I have enough time to myself? Attention, do I give and receive enough healthy attention?
Yeah.
Intimacy. Emotional connection, or intimacy, So is there at least one person in the world who fully accepts me for who I am? And then wider community, am I connecting regularly with a group of people that share a common interest with me? Now, they don't have to be your friends. It could be book club, or it could be a running club. But you're regularly getting together with people because it helps us to remember that our life is bigger than our own. So that's wider community. The 8th one is competence. So am I skilled enough to reach the dreams or the expectations that I'm holding for myself? And if I'm not skilled enough, at least do I know the next step? So if I need if I need a science degree to become whatever job I'm going to do, a chemical researcher or whatever, but I don't have a science degree yet, do you know the next step? Do you know how to research the universities and get yourself that degree? So competence is the 8th one. And then the 9th one is meaning and purpose. So am I aspiring to something? And meaning and purpose is created in 3 ways. Stretching mentally or physically, caring for others or being needed, and connecting to ideas that are bigger than ourselves. So those 9 things are our emotional needs, and we are prompted emotionally when one of those needs isn't being met. And again, we don't need to know what they are, because our physical prompts with our emotions will feel, a little bit nervous or a little bit anxious, and those emotions are there to guide you a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, to make sure that you do get your emotional needs met healthily. Yeah. But when they're not met healthily, especially over a long term, you're going to feel the difference. You're going to feel ongoing anxiety, or you might tip into depression, or you might start to have panic attacks, or you might even have some sort of trauma reactions. And at times like that, when you're consistently feeling those things and you find you're not able to repair them yourself, the faster you seek help, the better, because it's not complicated to resolve those things. In the same way that it's not, if you go, I've got all these spots all over my skin, and you go to a nutritionist and they go, well, you need to eat plant-based. Do you know what I mean? You need to stop eating, salami and whatever else you're eating. And you can tell I'm plant-based. I don't even know what else. I don't even know what people eat. If she says, or he says, here, eat this plant-based stuff, actually, you will feel better in a week or 2. It'll make that difference. And actually, mental health treatment is that fast, if not faster, because you can make the changes same day. And once you shift your mental self and then start to play that out in your real world and watch the changes, it's incredibly powerful. Yeah.
But what I will say is private mental health therapy, as in what I have paid you, is a huge privilege, right? So
Right.
I'm in the fortunate position where I can afford to pay for it at the exact moment I needed it. I didn't have to go see my GP, get a referral to the NHS, and wait, 6 to 9 months for some therapy. What on earth happens in those 6 to 9 months when you're unraveling and spiraling out of control? Well, we can all imagine what can happen there. So it's a huge privilege being able to afford it. But what I will also say is it's an investment in yourself, right? And I don't know if you're comfortable with talking about what you charge, but I didn't feel like it cost me a lot of money because I think we had maybe 4 sessions.
Yeah. So I charge about £100 per session.
Yeah.
It's around £100 a session. And but here's the thing: if you compare that with feeling depressed for another 4 months, or waking up every day feeling stressed because you are in a toxic relationship, or not being able to challenge things at work because you're negatively pattern matching to authority figures, and every day you go into work, you have to gather yourself to do those 8 hours or those 10 hours. If you compare it with that, and if you've got an iPhone, if you've spent £1,000 on an iPhone, okay, then you can afford to spend 3 or 4 sessions on your mental health.
Yeah.
Because and you've got to get this in context, because actually the money pays itself back. And this is about emotional wealth as well. Just going back to that the course we were talking about earlier. You cannot weigh everything up based on finances only. You've got to value your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, your spiritual health. So whatever it takes to make sure those things stay healthy, we need to invest in that. And the difficulty in this country, in the UK, whilst we are massively privileged to have the NHS, I mean, the NHS is a huge privilege, and all over the world people go, wow, look at the UK, the NHS, what a great idea. And it is a great idea. But because we are now, 4th or 5th generation, we now look at the NHS and expect it to be all things to all people, and it just isn't. It's fantastic on physical remedies, but for emotional and mental health, it's overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And, with systems in place that are sometimes fit for purpose and sometimes not. But again, what do you do when you're waiting for 9 months to access those sort of services? And I just don't think that we should all expect the National Health to supply everything.
No.
So in Ireland, I have a lot of clients that come from Ireland. They totally expect to pay for their health treatment as Southern Ireland, and so they don't hesitate for a moment to go, oh right, okay. So they know that it's, in the same way that you'd be £240 to hire a solicitor, it's around £100 an hour to get a really good therapist. Some are more than that, some are 120, some are 140. But the fact is, if you research them and realize it is not 10 sessions, it's not that. Like literally, if you've got a trauma, we resolve the trauma in the first one. And then over the next, I would say 3 to 4 sessions, maybe, the things that need to be resolved get resolved. If you were active, you can't sit back and go, oh, I'm going to blame the therapist because, he wasn't great or she wasn't great. You've got to arrive there thinking, okay, I'm going to get myself better. In the same way as if you break your leg and someone puts a cast over your leg and then it heals, and they go, okay, if you want full healing, you've got to do your physio. If you do your physio, you'll get the result. If you don't do the physio, you'll limp forever. You know what I mean? So it's like that, but mentally. So
it's really interesting though, isn't it, that we just completely take for granted that medical treatment of physical and mental should be free, and it's drummed into us because of, I suppose, history.
Yeah, but it wasn't originally. When it first happened at the end of the Second World War, when the NHS was started up, people didn't go really, because they were like, well, I can fix my own sprained ankle, or I can fix my own, or, you know, losing your, you know, reducing your eyesight at age 45 is normal. So, but I think generation by generation, we've been taught pretty much by the NHS, if that thing is going on with you, come and see us. And it is so reassuring, and it's fantastic for, you know, for safe childbirth. I mean, we have an amazing safe system in this country. We don't lose children generally in this country in the numbers that we used to 100 years ago. But you're right, they are massively skilled at some things, and I think there are other things that we kind of have to not expect the NHS to be a solution for all things, and that anything mentally or physically that you want to have resolved, you should be able to go there with, because the fact is there are not infinite financial resources in this country to subsidize excellence in all areas of mental and physical health. So I think on that subject, I think you're quite right to say that for private mental health treatment, it's really good to do your research. However, what I do know is that human givens therapy is probably, the research that's been done so far shows that it's 3 times more effective than the next most effective therapy. So generally, if you're looking at 10, 12 sessions somewhere else, you're probably looking at 3, 4 sessions with, and if you're charging 50 or 60 pounds for any other type of therapy, say times 10, that's 600. If you're charging 100 pounds for human givens therapy and you get 4, it's 400 quid. So if we want to bring it all down to money, which is not all about money, but if you want to bring it down to money, you can see that it is probably more cost effective to do that. You know,
I just think people need to, I'm not being all preachy, but I would love people to be more open about mental health issues. And I know that we are getting better, as I suppose as more people in high profile come out about mental health issues. It helps a lot, doesn't it? But just to focus some of our, as you say, the iPhone is a really good comparison. We think nothing. Even if you don't have very much money, you think nothing of paying 40-50 pounds a month for your mobile phone.
You know,
and that's 600 pounds a year, and it's a phone. Like, put some money into maybe a little bit of trauma therapy, and it's going to pay back, oh my gosh, dividends over the years, when you end up maybe not getting divorced or not screwing up your children's lives, or whatever that might be the repercussion of some inbuilt trauma from your previous life, not your previous life, you know, your early years.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree that this investment, but you know, it's about retraining our kind of social or kind of cultural consciousness to recognize that, that our mental health is totally worth investing in. And the longer you leave it, the same as the longer you leave any other sort of physical infection, the worse it's going to get. And so, and the ramifications, the knock-on effect of it, you know, I've got anxiety every day, and now I can't leave the house, and now I'm modeling that to my children, and now I am taking time off work, and that increases your anxiety. And when you look at how that can just grow really fast, the question you really want to say to yourself, look, I need to take control back. I need to call someone, find someone, and it's not a complicated process. You know, literally, I can speak to someone or get an email from someone one day and be working with them by the end of the week. Quite often. And then I'm finished working with them by the end of next month. I mean, it's literally that fast. So if we're in August just now, we could be done by the end of September. Not in all cases. So I just want to kind of say that there are situations where, you know, there are clients who I work with for 8 sessions or 10 sessions, but there are also clients who I work with for 1 or 2. And I call them and say, the second session's coming up. They go, actually, do you know what, I feel fine. I've changed this thing's resolved, this thing's, and I just go, brilliant. Because actually for me, good business is, and it's the weirdest business structure in the world, because my success is getting people off, getting their files closed as quickly as possible, because then they're likely to go away and go, do you know what? I had 10 sessions of whatever CBT or whatever the therapy they had. I've had 10 sessions of that, and then I went to see this human givens therapist, and it got resolved in 3 sessions. And you want people out there saying, go and have a conversation with Healthy Chat, go and figure that thing out. You want people out there saying that.
Yeah.
And also you want people getting really good mental health treatment or emotional health treatment, because sometimes the things that you think are huge, when you speak to someone who's got nothing to do with your life and nothing to do with your job, and they can see it from an outside independent place, and they'll connect 2 or 3 ideas that you speak out. And there is a kind of life element to what gets spoken out. If you imagine you've lived for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, the things you choose to share in the first 30 or 40 minutes of a conversation, there's no coincidence to what you're speaking out, because you kind of know somewhere that they're connected. Yeah. So when you speak them out and I hear them, I'll be listening to, oh, that's very interesting that person shared that thing in that way. I wonder if they're pattern matching to, something that they've learned or something that they've seen, or some, movie that they were scared about when they were 7 or something. Yeah. It's amazing what people say, but it's amazing also how straightforward it can be, because we all want to be a little bit more complicated than perhaps we all are. But when you see it 100 times or 1,000 times, you go, oh, okay, I think this is probably a pattern that person has created for themselves. Let's see if, sometimes just shining it back to them is enough. But it's totally worth investing in that, because feeling depressed or anxious for another month is not worth it. It's just like,
it's hell. It's awful. It's hell on earth. It's it's horrible. Yeah. You've prompted me to, right, we do need to keep an eye on time, but we can go up to an hour. But you've prompted me to think about, and I know we've touched on this before, but a pattern matching thing that I do, and I've talked about it before, but I've been diagnosed in the past with seasonal affective disorder, and then it was diagnosed by, she was a therapist, she was a psychotherapist, but a more traditional psychotherapist, like 12 years ago. And I've created this pattern now that every year, once we hit like October, as soon as the clocks change, my life changes. I have to go into my hibernation mode, stop going out, stop being social, locking myself down. But I do really feel like I've just created a complete pattern for myself there. I'm not sure I do actually have this thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're right. I think we can be, once someone suggests that is the case, and it might be the case, there might be a physical thing going on, but there might be something that kind of happens around September, October, historically, that gave you a fright, or that, and actually you're pattern matching to that. So it might be every time you go, well, there's something awful that happened in September, October, way back. And it might be. It just, I think pattern matching is what we were designed to do, that from birth. We either pattern match to something in the environment, which we're innately programmed to do, or we pattern match to an experience that we've had, or things that we see other people do and assume that they're right. But those things can be, as soon as they work for us, they become unconscious. And so a lot of us don't even know why we're pattern matching to something. But we just do it because it's always been done that way, and we don't question it. It's like that story, that story of the lady who gets married, and she makes this kind of meal for her husband, and he comes back and goes, oh, that's lovely, what is that? And she goes, oh, it's lamb. And she goes, well, how do you make it? She says, well, you get a lamb joint and you cut it in half, and you put it in the pot, and you put these vegetables in with it, and then you let it steam. And she gives them the recipe. Oh, that's really interesting, it's really delicious. So why do you cut it in half then? And she goes, oh, I don't know. I said, well, that's the recipe. He says, but then she gets her thinking, she goes back to her mum and she goes, Mum, you know that recipe for the lamb, why do we cut it in half and put it in the pot? She goes, we've always done it that way. She said, that's what my mum taught me. So she goes, can you ask Granny? So then she goes and asks, the mum goes and asks her mum and says, you know that lamb recipe that you taught me, why do you cut the lamb in half as part of the recipe? And her mum went, small pot. Because her grandmother had only ever had a small pot. So she had to cut the lamb in half, but 2 generations down, they've got big pots now. They don't think about that, but they still cut the lamb in half thinking that's part of the recipe when it's not. It's part of the practicalities of what happened 3 generations ago. And so I think lots of us do pattern match to things where there's no practical reason to do it anymore.
Yeah.
But we do it thinking, well, it's just the way it's always done, whereas sometimes we need to question those things going, but it doesn't have to work like that for you.
Yeah, agree. Oh, it's an incredible thing what you do. I just think anybody in the world that does a job where you're making such a core difference to people's lives, and you know, obviously all the wonderful people in the NHS and the people in the caring industry overall. I'm in awe of what everybody does, but just particularly sort of mental health people involved in that field that are really trying their all just to, as you say, I really like that pyramid effect you describe of once you sort out one person, then that impacts on all the people in their circle, then that might flow through to them, then it flows through to the next level down, and it's really, really powerful to try and get as many people in this country and the world as mentally well as possible. But,
I think that's right. And I think the fact that we're talking about it, and thank you so much for creating this platform for people to talk about things like this, you know, to kind of your tribe. Because I think the first step is really just to talk more about it and to get people comfortable going, it's totally fine. If you broke your leg, you go to a doctor. If you have an anxiety attack, go and speak to a really good therapist. And I think that, the things that you do as well, these are all connected. And this thing about us, when you get really strong mentally and emotionally, it does affect your friends. It's because we're all connected. Yeah. So actually what's good for you is good for me because you live on the same planet I live on. And so if you can help people to feel more confident about their finances and the things that they're dealing with, that's good for you because, we all want to feel like we're competent and then share that knowledge and that skill, whether it's a physical thing or a practical thing or a mental thing, perfect it ourselves and then share it with our friends and our families and our colleagues. It's great.
So where do people find you if they want to investigate you a bit more or read through websites or social media and stuff?
Yeah, so the best place to find me is just at my website, which is healthychat.co.uk. And anyone who wants to, you can read everything you want there, and then you can either text, phone, or email me just to say, let's put something in the diary. We can do that. And if you want to have a conversation first, I do 15 minutes, no charge, to have a conversation to find out if you might feel that I am the right person for you, and which is great in those 15 minutes. But equally in those 15 minutes, you might decide that, oh, you know what, this doesn't feel like I thought it was going to feel, and that's fine as well. So there's 15 minutes where, we can just have a conversation. And then for high performance exec coaching for people who are in corporates or people who are business owners themselves, it's jenniferbroadley.com. And that's for exec coaching or just high performance coaching. Yeah.
And you've got Facebook page and you've got your Facebook group, which is Working Mums Divorce Recovery.
Yeah, so if you're in that group, if you're in that category and you are going through divorce or are recently divorced or even a long time ago divorced, I've been 19 years divorced. But yeah, if you're in that category, if you're working, if you're a mum and you're going through divorce in any way, you can join that Facebook group, Working Mums Divorce Recovery. And there's 3 questions to answer before you get in there because we are quite careful about who comes into that group, so that we make sure that the conversations are as helpful and practical and kind as possible. There's no kind of we're very positive and uplifting in that group.
Yeah, it's a safe group.
Proper safe, yeah.
Brilliant. So we better end it there. The only other thing I was gonna say to you was like, what next? But I think I know you've gone through quite an evolution with your business, haven't you, over lockdown, where you've moved it to this online model. So that's where it's going to go from, right?
And I think I will just I'll kind of rebrand, retrain my marketing to be just online. And I know for some people are like, oh, but I want to come and see you face to face. Honestly, the benefits of seeing a good therapist, you know, whether you see them face to face or virtually, lots of things are changing to virtual. Yeah. And it doesn't change the quality and caliber of the information or the conversations, and it doesn't change the caliber or the speed of the change. So I'm pretty much committed to keeping my business online and being able to, instead of just serve my regional area, to be able to serve, you know, across the UK as well.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you ever so much for joining me. That was I knew it would be a really inspirational and educational, but an honest conversation, because you do an incredible thing. So thank you.
As to you. Nice to see you.
Right, I'll press stop, but don't go. Thank you everybody for watching. Don't forget to, if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to my channel, or subscribe to my podcast channel as well, which you might have downloaded this on, because it goes out in visual and audio. And don't forget about my book, which I think when I publish this interview or chat, that my book might be out, because it's out on the 1st of September. So The Money Guide to Transform Your Life. I'm going to call it my 5th child, because it comes after my 3 actual children, my cat, and then my book. It's I can't wait to get it out, and it feels like such an opportune moment when we're in such tough financial times to get this guide out. It's it really, if you read it, it will transform your life. It's quite a promise from me, but there's some great money saving tips in there for the short term and for the long term. Right, bye bye. Thank you for watching.